The Millionaire CEO demanded the black waitress to kneel. Then her father stepped in and everything changed. Kneel. Now. Are you out of your mind? The voice boomed across the ballroom like thunder crashing through a storm. The music died, glasses stilled midair. Every guest at the Crystal Crown Hotel turned, their eyes locked on the scene unfolding. They stared at the young woman holding an empty silver tray, her hands trembling. Her name was Immani Carter, 26 years old, a single mother, nursing student, working double shifts to keep the lights on. Her uniform was pristine, her smile rehearsed, but nothing prepared her for this. Across from her stood Alexander Drake, the towering billionaire CEO of Drake Dynamics, a ruthless tech mogul with the reputation for both groundbreaking innovations and cold, unrelenting control. Immani could see the rage boiling in his icy blue eyes, the tension in his jaw. He was dressed immaculately in a white tuxedo, now splattered with deep red wine dripping down his chest. Immani's heart pounded as her hands shook, the weight of the moment crushing her. "Sir, please," she stammered. "It was an accident, I swear." His nostrils flared, his gaze darkened. "An accident? That stain cost more than your paycheck." Her throat tightened, her eyes welling up. "I'm truly sorry, sir." Before he could finish, his voice cut through the room like a blade. "Maybe you should kneel and apologize properly." The gasps were immediate. A ripple of disbelief washed over the ballroom, the silence deafening. Executives, investors, and their wives watched in frozen silence. A few exchanged nervous glances, while others reached for their phones. The click of recorders filled the space, capturing the tension. "Did you hear me?" Drake barked, his tone growing darker. "Kneel." Immani's face drained of color, her breath caught in her throat. The orchestra's music had stopped completely. Even the air in the room felt frozen. Her manager, Mrs. Collins, stood at the side of the hall, eyes wide, mouth slightly ajar, too terrified to speak up. Immani's lips quivered. "Please, Mr. Drake, I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to ruin your night." His voice was sharp and bitter. "You didn't mean to humiliate me in front of Chicago's top investors." He dabbed at the stain again, his anger rising. "If you want to keep your job," he sneered, "kneel." Immani stood, rooted in place, torn between the raw fear twisting in her chest and the dignity that fought to rise within her. Around her, whispers began. "Is he serious?" someone murmured. "Just kneel, it'll be over," another voice said. But some stared, too stunned to speak, recording the moment, sensing that something much larger was unfolding. Immani's hands tightened around the tray. "Please, sir, don't do this," she whispered, her voice trembling. Suddenly, Drake slammed his hand down on the table, the sound echoing through the marble floor, sending ripples of fear across the room. Immani's knees buckled as her heart thudded in her ears. And in that exact moment, the story froze. To understand how such humiliation came to haunt Chicago's most glamorous night, we must rewind. 1 hour earlier, the same ballroom had glowed with laughter, music, and the illusion of perfection. The Crystal Crown Hotel was alive with energy. Waiters moved seamlessly through the crowd, trays of champagne in hand. Laughter echoed as executives toasted deals worth billions. In the midst of the glamour and wealth, Immani Carter whispered to her coworker, Lena, "If I can just make it through tonight, my rent's covered." Lena smiled weakly and warned, "Just avoid him," glancing toward Alexander Drake. "He's trouble in a tux." Immani nodded, exhaling quietly. "Trouble pays the bills," she muttered under her breath. Neither woman knew that by the end of the evening, this ballroom would be the scene of a reckoning. Immani, the quiet waitress who had always been invisible, would soon make a name that the world would never forget. The clock above the grand chandelier ticked, its timepiece marking 7:42 p.m. when the night began to unravel. The ballroom shone like a jewel, polished marble floors reflecting the glow of chandeliers, waiters moving with practiced precision. The music of a jazz quartet played softly, filling the space with rhythm. Chicago's wealthiest, the city's elite, enjoyed their high-powered conversations and billion-dollar deals. But amid the clinking of glasses and chatter, Immani silently prayed for a moment of peace. She was dressed in a crisp black and white uniform, balancing a tray of champagne flutes. Her manager's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Stay sharp."
Table 1 is the investors section. Mr. Drake hates delays. Immani exhaled again, wishing she could take a moment to breathe. Her shift was already running long. Her feet ached, her paycheck barely covered her daughter's medication, and she had skipped dinner just to afford the gas to get here. But she kept her smile steady as she approached the investor's table. There, standing in his usual commanding presence, was Alexander Drake. Tall, confident, and exuding arrogance, he was a man whose charisma had the power to draw all eyes to him. "Innovation doesn't wait for mistakes," he declared loudly to the table, his voice carrying like thunder. His audience laughed on cue. Immani moved carefully behind him, setting down a glass of champagne for one of the guests. But fate, as it often does, had its own plans. An elderly investor at the table shifted his chair to catch a falling napkin. The chair brushed against Immani's elbow, and in that instant, her tray tipped. The deep red wine splashed across Drake's immaculate white tuxedo in slow motion, staining it in an instant. The gasps were immediate. The music faltered, and all eyes turned toward her. The room froze. Immani's heart pounded painfully in her chest. She could barely breathe. "Oh my God," she stammered, panic rising in her throat. "I'm so sorry, sir. It was an accident." Drake blinked once, twice, his face unreadable for a moment. Then his jaw tightened, his voice cold as steel. "An accident? That stain costs more than your paycheck." His eyes blazed with anger. Immani's throat closed up. "I'll pay for the cleaning," she said quickly, her voice trembling. Drake let out a low, mirthless laugh, as if the idea of her paying was absurd. "You'll pay?" He shook his head, dismissing her words. "I think an apology is a better start. You ruined a $5,000 suit in front of Chicago's top investors, and all you can say is sorry?" A ripple of whispers moved through the room, with some people shaking their heads, sensing the tension that was building. Phones appeared in hands, recording the scene for all to see. "Maybe you should kneel," Drake's voice sliced through the air like a blade. "Kneel and apologize properly." Gasps filled the ballroom as the words hung in the air. Immani stood frozen, her face pale, her body shaking. She could feel every eye on her, the weight of their judgment pressing down on her. Her throat tightened, her hands shaking around the tray as she whispered, "Please, sir, don't do this." Drake's eyes narrowed, his expression hardening. "Kneel, now!" His voice rose, and the entire room fell into a hushed silence. The music had long stopped, and the only sound was the cold echo of his command. The air in the ballroom felt heavy, suffocating. Immani's knees felt as though they would give way beneath her. And yet, she stood there, rooted in place, trapped between fear and dignity. The whispers around her grew louder. "Is he serious?" someone murmured. "She should just do it. It'll be over." Others exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to speak up. But no one moved to intervene. No one dared. "Please don't make me do this," Immani whispered again, her voice barely a breath.
The tears she had been holding back finally began to well in her eyes. But just as she thought she could take no more, a voice thundered from the back of the room, commanding attention. "If she kneels, you'd better pray I don't stand," the voice rumbled, deep and unwavering. The room froze, heads turned, phones lifted. Silence fell again. Immani's heart skipped a beat as all eyes shifted to the back of the room. A tall man in a dark navy suit with a broad, imposing figure walked forward. His security badge gleamed under the chandelier lights. He walked toward Drake with a quiet, unstoppable determination. Drake froze in place, his hand still raised toward Immani, the arrogance in his posture faltering for the first time. The crowd instinctively parted to make way for the man, and his steps echoed with authority. He stopped in front of Drake, his presence commanding. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, in a steady voice, he spoke. "Apologize to her." The crowd gasped in shock. Drake blinked, stunned. He scoffed, "You work security, don't you? I could have you thrown out of here in 5 seconds." His voice faltered, but he was still trying to regain control.
The man's jaw tightened. His name badge read, Marcus Carter, the head of hotel security. But there was something more in his eyes than just a hotel worker. Something personal. Something deeper. Immani's breath caught in her throat. "Sir, please," she whispered, her voice trembling, not from fear, but from recognition. "Staff, son?" Marcus's voice cut through the air, low but sharp. "I've buried brothers so men like you could sit comfortably in rooms like this." The room fell into a heavy silence. Not a single person dared to move or speak. Marcus stood tall, his presence undeniable. Marcus Carter's words hung in the air like a weight. Silence spread across the ballroom as all eyes shifted from Drake to him. The guests held their breath, the tension thickening. Alexander Drake, the man who commanded entire empires, was at a loss for words. For the first time, his posture faltered, his hands trembling at his sides. "Do you know who I am?" Drake demanded, his voice rising, trying to reclaim control. He stepped forward, but Marcus didn't flinch. "Do you?" Marcus responded, calmly, his voice low but steady. The room gasped. The arrogance in Drake's eyes had faded. For the first time, his face flushed with uncertainty. He darted his eyes around the room, searching for support, but there was none. The once certain billionaire, used to being the center of attention, now found himself surrounded by guests who were no longer watching in admiration, but in judgment. As the silence deepened, Marcus's calm voice cut through it all. "No woman, no matter her job, her color, or her pay, should ever be ordered to kneel, not in my hotel." The room shifted. A slow, hesitant clap came from the back, then another, then another. The applause built, echoing through the marble hall. It was the sound of justice rising from the people who had been silent too long. Immani's chest tightened, and tears that had threatened to spill finally broke free. The weight of the moment, the overwhelming sense of being seen and heard, crashed over her. She wiped her eyes, but she wasn't ashamed. For the first time, she wasn't ashamed. Marcus turned toward her, his eyes softening. "You don't bow to arrogance. Baby girl, you stand tall, even when your legs shake."
Immani nodded through her tears, feeling her strength return. "Yes, sir," she whispered, her voice steady now. Drake stood frozen, his face, once flushed with fury, now drained of color. His empire of fear, built over years of ruthless decisions, had crumbled in an instant. In front of the most powerful people in Chicago, he had been stripped bare. His suit, his title, his money, all of it had failed him in the face of true power. "You're finished here," he growled, his voice full of venom. "Both of you. I'll make sure no hotel, no company, no one in this city ever hires you again." Marcus, unfazed by the threat, tilted his head slightly, almost as if he were considering a child's tantrum. "You can't fire me, Mr. Drake," he said, his voice steady. "The hotel board hired me to protect this building from arrogance like yours." Murmurs spread throughout the crowd. The hotel manager, Mr. Reynolds, stepped forward, his voice shaky as he spoke. "He's right, Mr. Drake. Security reports directly to the board." Drake's face went white. He took a step back, trying to regain control of the situation, but it was slipping further from his grasp. "What did you say?" he demanded, his voice cracking with panic. Reynolds swallowed hard. "He outranks you here, sir." Gasps filled the room, followed by whispers and quiet laughter. Even the orchestra musicians, once frozen in their places, leaned in, eager to see what would happen next. It was clear. Drake had lost. The mighty billionaire had been humbled in front of everyone. Marcus turned to Immani, his expression softening. "You okay, miss?" he asked gently. Immani wiped her eyes, nodding slowly. "Yes, I think so," she replied, her voice quiet but strong. Marcus smiled faintly. "Then it's handled." But Drake's fury returned with a vengeance. "This is insubordination," he hissed, his face twisted in rage. "You'll regret this." Marcus took a step closer, his voice dropping but carrying clearly across the room. "You spent your life making people kneel to feel powerful. But tonight, people saw what power really is." He gestured around the room, his eyes sweeping over the crowd. "It's not in the suit, or the title, or the applause. It's in how you treat the people who can't fight back."
A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Slowly, someone began to clap. Then another joined in. The clapping spread through the ballroom, growing louder with each passing second. Within moments, the entire room was on its feet, applauding. Immani stood still, her heart racing, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from relief. She had been seen. She had been heard. The world had just witnessed her reclaim her dignity. Drake's face twisted in disbelief. "You're all insane!" he spat. "She spilled wine on me!" From the crowd, a woman's voice rang out, clear and firm. "And you spilled your soul, trying to make her kneel." The applause grew louder, drowning out Drake's protests. Cameras flashed, reporters rushed forward, and the world began to take notice. Immani covered her mouth with trembling hands. Tears fell freely now, but they weren't tears of shame. They were tears of release, of finally letting go of the weight she had carried for so long. Marcus turned to her once more, his hand gently lifting her chin. "You don't bow to pride, sweetheart. You stand tall." Immani nodded, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, sir." Drake stood there, red-faced and trembling, his empire of fear crumbling before his eyes. He grabbed his coat, his hands shaking. "You'll regret this, all of you." But it was clear he had already lost. The room, the power, the respect, everything he had spent years building had vanished in an instant. As he stormed out of the ballroom, his head hung low, the applause continued. Immani stood tall, a symbol of strength and dignity in a world that had tried to strip her of both. But the battle wasn't over. Not yet. Marcus didn't move. "No, son," he said softly, his voice calm and firm. "You will." The crowd parted, allowing the disgraced billionaire to storm out of the ballroom. Immani, trembling from the chaos, leaned against the nearest pillar. The applause, though slowly fading, still echoed in her ears, while the world outside prepared to judge what had just transpired inside the Crystal Crown Hotel.
As the ballroom emptied, murmurs and camera flashes filled the space. The moment Alexander Drake stormed out, the applause dissolved into an eerie hush. It was as if everyone realized that they had just witnessed a moment that would be replayed in history for years to come. Immani stood near the dessert table, her hands still trembling. Her reflection in a silver platter looked like that of a stranger. Red-rimmed eyes, wine splattered on her sleeve.
dignity hanging by a fragile thread. Behind her, Marcus, having removed his earpiece, took a long, steady breath. The adrenaline that had fueled him moments ago now left a heavy stillness in its place. "Dad?" she whispered, her voice small. He turned to face her, his expression softening. "Yeah, baby girl?" Immani's chin quivered. "You just confronted a billionaire in front of every investor in Chicago. We're both fired. We'll lose everything." Marcus stepped closer, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "We can lose anything, Immani," he said softly, "but never our dignity." Immani shook her head, tears spilling freely now. "Dignity doesn't pay rent. Dignity doesn't buy Maya's inhaler." Marcus didn't respond immediately. His eyes traced the spilled wine on the marble floor, the scattered napkins, the faint echo of gasps still lingering in the chandelier light. "You're right," he said quietly. "But one day you'll learn that dignity buys peace, and peace is something money can't afford." From a far end of the hall, Mrs. Collins hurried toward them, wringing her hands. "Immani, I tried to stop him. I swear the board's in shock. The press won't leave." Immani wiped her face quickly, trying to compose herself. "I'm sorry for the scene," she muttered. Mrs. Collins hesitated before leaning in close, her voice dropping. "Don't apologize. You handled yourself better than most of them out there. And honey, whatever happens, don't talk to reporters yet. They're circling." Through the open doors, flashes of cameras stung the darkness outside. Reporters shouted over one another, eager for answers. "Miss Carter, how did it feel when he told you to kneel?" one of them called. "Sir, do you plan to press charges?" Marcus's hand found Immani's, firm but gentle. "Ignore them," he said softly. "Let the noise eat itself."
They slipped through the service corridor, away from the chaos. The hallway smelled faintly of coffee and floor polish, a world apart from the glitter and glass outside. Immani sank onto a metal bench, her face buried in her palms. "The video's everywhere already, isn't it?" she asked, her voice shaky. Marcus exhaled through his nose. "Probably." Immani looked up, her eyes wet but steady. "Then it's over for me." Marcus crouched in front of her, locking eyes with her. "No, sweetheart, it's just beginning." In that quiet space behind the ballroom, between fear and faith, a spark of something unplanned began to burn. It wasn't revenge, it wasn't fame, it was truth. Just as the door swung open again, a security guard entered, holding up a phone. "Sir, you might want to see this," he said, his voice urgent. On the screen, a video was already climbing past 100,000 views. The caption flashed in bold letters, #Kneel for no one. Chicago waitress refuses to bow to billionaire. Marcus met his daughter's eyes. Neither of them spoke, but they both knew the world was now watching. By morning, the world would have seen it. Every platform, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, was buzzing with the same thumbnail. A trembling waitress, a red-stained tuxedo, and the words, "He told her to kneel." Within hours, the video hit 5 million views. By noon, it doubled. News anchors debated the event. Talk show hosts dissected the drama. #Kneel for no one trended in 15 countries. Immani's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Old classmates, distant relatives, and strangers flooded her inbox. Some messages were cruel, others raw with support. "You stood tall for all of us," one message read. "They've made heroes for less." But back in her small apartment, on the south side, she sat on the couch with her daughter, Maya, 6 years old. They were watching the news in disbelief. "This is the moment that has divided America," the anchor said as the footage of the gala played. A billionaire CEO demanding a waitress kneel, and the security officer who stopped him. Maya tugged at her sleeve. "Mommy, is that you?" Immani blinked at the TV. Her tear-streaked face stared back at her. She forced a smile. "Yeah, baby, that's Mommy." "Did you win?"
Mai asked. Immani hesitated, then whispered, "Maybe." Across town, Marcus Carter sat alone in a diner booth, his coffee long gone cold. The TV above the counter replayed the same footage from multiple angles. Every word he'd spoken, "You don't bow to arrogance, baby girl," was now being quoted across social media. A group of veterans sitting at the counter raised their mugs. "That's him," one of them said. "That's the guy who told off that billionaire." Marcus just sighed. He hadn't meant to start a movement. He had just wanted to protect his daughter. Outside the hotel, camera vans lined the driveway, and reporters swarmed like bees around every door. The Crystal Crown Hotel released a statement before noon, condemning discrimination and humiliation in any form. But Drake Dynamics stayed silent, its CEO nowhere to be found. By evening, leaked audio surfaced, private comments from Alexander Drake after leaving the gala. "She's lucky I didn't have her dragged out," Drake had said. "These people think they're equals now." The clip exploded online. Sponsors withdrew. Stockholders demanded his resignation. Drake's billion-dollar image crumbled in 24 hours. Meanwhile, strangers raised thousands for Immani and her daughter through a viral fundraiser titled Stand Tall Fund. The next morning, Good Morning America called, then CNN, then The Today Show. The world didn't just want to hear her apology, they wanted to hear her voice. Immani stared at the phone on the table, shaking her head. "Dad, I didn't ask for this." Marcus smiled faintly. "That's how truth works, baby girl. You don't ask for it. It finds you." He glanced at the trending hashtag on his phone, glowing bright as the sunrise. Hashtag Kneel for No One. The world had already chosen sides, and this time, the waitress wasn't the one kneeling. By the third day, Alexander Drake was no longer a billionaire. He was a headline. Every channel looped the same footage, him shouting, Immani trembling, Marcus stepping in. Investors fled. Drake Dynamics sank like a ship in a storm. Stocks plummeted. A luxury car brand pulled its endorsement, issuing a statement, "We do not partner with humiliation." Outside his Chicago penthouse, protesters gathered with signs, "Dignity, Power, hashtag Kneel for No One." Inside the city, Immani Carter walked nervously through the glass doors of Good Morning America. She wore a simple navy dress, borrowed from her neighbor, her curls framing her face. Marcus stood beside her, calm and protective, but the cameras made her palms sweat. The host greeted them warmly. "Immani, you've become a symbol of grace under pressure. When you stood there that night, what was going through your mind?" Immani took a breath, her voice steady but soft. "Honestly, I wasn't thinking about courage or dignity. I was thinking about rent, about my little girl at home. But when he told me to kneel, something in me said, if you do this once, you'll do it forever. So I stood." Applause thundered across the studio. Marcus added quietly, "I didn't plan to intervene. I just knew silence makes bullies stronger. And my daughter didn't deserve silence." The interviewer leaned forward. "You've started something larger than one incident. What do you hope people take from this?" Immani glanced at her father. "That respect isn't earned by money. It's earned by humanity." Across America, screens flickered with her words. Twitter flooded with clips of the interview, captions reading, "The waitress who stood tall." Meanwhile, Alexander Drake sat alone in his high-rise office, staring at a wall of muted news screens. His assistant entered, visibly shaken. "Sir, the board just voted. They want your resignation." Drake laughed bitterly. "They think I'm the villain?" She whispered. "They don't think. They know." When he finally signed the resignation letter, cameras caught him leaving the building through a side door, his face hidden behind sunglasses. No one cheered. No one pitied him. The man who had demanded others kneel now walked with his head bowed. Back in the studio, the host handed Immani a check, donations raised by people across the nation. Tears filled her eyes. "I don't know how to thank everyone," she said softly. "But if one waitress, one worker, learns to stand tall because of this, then it was worth it." Marcus placed an arm around her shoulders, his voice breaking slightly. "Baby girl, you didn't just stand for yourself. You stood for all of us." As the camera panned out, applause swelled. A nation that had watched a woman humiliated now watched her reclaim her power with grace, not vengeance. And in the shadows of that fall, a new kind of rise began.
The next few weeks felt like living in a dream that wasn't hers. Immani Carter's name was everywhere. Morning talk shows, newspaper headlines, and even college billboards reading "Stand Tall." Inspired by Immani, she had gone from waitress to national voice overnight. But it wasn't fame she wanted. It was peace. One late afternoon, she sat on the small balcony of her apartment, holding a mug of tea. Below, the Chicago skyline glowed gold against the setting sun. Marcus stepped outside, his broad shoulders framed by the light. "You've been quiet today," he said. "I just keep asking myself," she murmured, "why me? All I wanted was a shift that paid rent." He smiled faintly. "Maybe you were meant to do more than serve tables. Maybe you were meant to serve truth." She looked at him thoughtfully. "I don't want people to just remember what happened. I want to change what happens next." He nodded slowly. "Then start there." That night, Immani opened her laptop and began sketching a dream, a community restaurant that would train, hire, and empower underpaid workers. She'd call it Brooks' Table, after her grandmother, the woman who had taught her to cook and forgive. When the story broke that Immani Carter was opening a restaurant funded by donations from the Stand Tall Fund, news crews returned. But this time, there were no tears or trembling, only purpose. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, the crowd was filled with local families, veterans, nurses, single parents, and the very servers who once worked beside her. The sign above the entrance glowed softly in the light. Brooks' Table, where everyone stands tall. The woman who had been told to kneel now stood at her own table, and everyone else was rising with her. If this story moved you, don't scroll past it. Like this video and share it so that someone out there remembers to stand tall too.